get started and call this meeting to order. Welcome to the Meridian Township Zoning Board of Appeals meeting. Today is Wednesday, December 8th, 2021, and I will start with a roll call, and I'll start to my right. I don't know how else to say that, but Member Hendrickson.
Present.
And Member Opsmer.
Present.
And Chair Mansour is present. We have a 3-person board today. I believe that means that we have to have unanimous voting in order to have quorum.
Correct.
Okay, so just so we all know the rules going forward for our cases today. First up is approval of our agenda. Hopefully everybody got a chance to take a look. Member Hendrickson.
Move the agenda. Support.
Supported by Member Opsmer. So we will go ahead to a vote. Chair Mansour is a yes. Member Hendrickson?
Yes.
And Member Opsmer?
Yes.
Okay, the agenda passes. So we'll move on to ratification of the minutes for Wednesday, November 10th, 2021.
I move approval of the minutes.
Support.
Supported, motion by Member Hendrickson, supported by Member Opsmer. And we will go to a vote. Chair Mansour is yes. Trustee Opsmer?
Yes.
Got it all backwards here in my notes. Member Hendrickson?
Yes.
So the minutes are approved. We will go next to communications, which I see none of in this packet. So next we will go to unfinished business, which brings us to ZBA case number 21-10-27-1, Leverage and Door, 2050 Sheldrake Avenue, Okemos, Michigan, 48864. And I will turn it over to Mr. Chapman.
Good evening. So the applicant requested at the November 10th, 2021 meeting to table their request to construct a 2.5-story single-family home at 6074 Columbia Street. The request at that time was for a 14-foot front yard setback, 2.5-foot side yard setback on the south side of the proposed house, and driveway coverage of 69.7%. So the applicant has since submitted a revised plan to address some of the comments that the ZBA members had at that meeting. So the canopy on the west facade was removed to change the variance from 14 feet to 16 feet from the front property line on Columbia Street. The Lake Lansing Overlay District requires a minimum front yard setback of 20 feet. The driveway coverage was reduced from 69.7% to 65%. This was done by narrowing the driveway width from 23.75 feet to 22 feet. And the Lake Lansing overlay requires lots that are less than 65 feet to have a maximum of 50% coverage for the driveway in the front yard. The south canopy that was previously proposed will be removed. That will no longer require a variance. Instead, a roof will be added to the porch on the south facade. The eave of the porch will be allowed to project into that side yard setback 2.5 feet if constructed with non-combustible materials. So the request now is for a variance of 3.9 feet for the front yard setback on Columbia Street, and also a variance of 15% for driveway coverage. And that's all I have.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chapman. Would the applicant or the applicant's representative like to come up and say anything? And please just state your name and address for the public record.
Yes, I'm Tim Brzezowski, 613 Grove Street, East Lansing, and I'm the architect for the project. And,
welcome back.
So in response to the comments that were made last time, or the concerns expressed, we did eliminate the west canopy. So that leaves us, we're proposing 16.1 feet from the existing street line, which is the current distance. So there's an existing house. Of course, we're removing the existing house and proposing to build a new 2.5-story house. So our building front would be where the existing front is, and apparently there was previously a variance granted for that location. And then, as Keith said, we've trimmed up the driveway a little bit in response to the width. So we're at 22 feet, which is, it's not, doesn't get us to 50%, but it's an improvement on what's there. Just to reiterate from the last meeting, our north building line is essentially where the existing building is, and then the south building line, the current situation is about 2.5 feet from the property line, so we're actually moving our building about 3 feet from the south property line. So we think that we're improving the condition along the south, and we're not really doing anything different along the north. So we asked, there was some discussion, and it seemed like the tone of the meeting is can we grant any variances because all the properties are narrow. So we asked Mr. Chapman if he would kind of look at other variances, and so we thank you for your homework there. So he found that within a block or two there have been 18 similar variances granted, either for front yard coverage or for setback. But you also said before the meeting that had you gone farther north, there would have been even more. You kind of limited the study to kind of close proximity. So, I don't know how that helps us craft the unique condition. And we're essentially asking to preserve the existing conditions from the coverage and then also for the setback. I did like to take a look at the building. Could we preserve some of the existing building? And one of the things is that when you go to 2.5 stories, our building code requires us to construct with 2x6 studs. So we can't do it with 2x4 studs. So to construct the additional half story, essentially we would have to go into the existing building, remove the interior finishes, the mechanicals, the electrical, the exterior siding, because it has to be a firewall, and then we would have to really install like 2x6 studs adjacent. So it's really it's impractical to really think about adding the additional story for structural reasons. We also think that the footings, foundations wouldn't be able to support it. So we did looked at that again. We did make a floor plan change, which Mr. Chapman referenced there. So we've tucked the first floor entrance and second and third floor back a little bit to accommodate the roof over the porch or the entranceway there to kind of pick up weather protection, but it did allow us to eliminate that canopy along the south side. So we've eliminated one request completely, and then I think we've improved upon the other two requests from your perspective. And then, we're just so many variances have been granted that hopefully that would be considered in the logic there. So, anything else that you want to add, Scott? Or
variances are in the packet.
Yes, yeah. There's the table. I don't know if you saw the table there, and so I think one of them was 74%. Coverage, and several of them were quite a bit closer than what we currently are at. And I'll be available for any questions. And so we hope that you would approve this. All right.
Great. Thank you so much.
You. Yep.
We appreciate you coming back. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this case tonight? If not, I'm going to close public comment and go into our board time. All right. We'll go to board time. Member Hendrickson.
Yeah, I want to take a moment to appreciate the work that Keith did to prepare that table. I know that was helpful to me in considering this, as well as to thank the applicant for taking our comments into consideration between the last meeting and tonight. Overall, from my perspective, I think this is a far more palatable request before this body tonight. I do appreciate, even as minimal as it might seem, the narrowing of the driveway to have less impervious surface. And I believe that I could make a straight-faced argument in favor of all of the review criteria being met for these variances. And we'll get to that in a moment, I'm sure, but I will likely be supporting these variances as requested.
Thank you, Member Hendrickson. And yes, I would agree. I actually don't have any questions from reading what was in the packet and considering what what all we discussed in our last meeting about this case. So I feel comfortable going through criteria if the rest of my members here feel comfortable with that. And I would agree. I agree with Member Hendrickson. I really appreciate going back and taking the time and effort to minimizing as much as possible. And I am sensitive to the fact that there are, everybody on the block just about has a variance, and you can see why. I mean, it's a very tricky spot to build in. So I do appreciate that going back through this plan and just tightening it up as much as you could, and that really is a very positive thing in my view as well. So we'll just go through the criteria, and I think we're probably all right there. Let's see. Criteria number 1, unique circumstances exist that are peculiar to the land or structure that are not applicable to other land or structures in the same zoning district. And while I think we had some arguments at our last meeting that if all the homes in this area are unique, then are any of them unique? But I would say that this, yes, I would agree that every one of these lots here is unique in circumstance, just due to the shape, size, and just the unique nature that every individual building consists of in that area. So if I have any, I can meet that, and I can also meet these circumstances are not self-created, especially considering you bought the house as is and are keeping relatively the same footprint, if not tightening it up even by a few feet here and there. Strict interpretation and enforcement of the literal terms and provisions of this chapter would result in practical difficulties. And I do believe that not granting this variance would prevent you from building a new structure, certainly any structure, or even as Mr. Ronkowski, did I say that correctly? Rosowski. I'm so sorry. I think I mispronounced it last time as well. Rosowski. As he so eloquently put, I mean, you can't even build up without tearing apart the entire house. So I do think that this would result in practical difficulties. I feel that we can meet that, which I think leads right into that the alleged practical difficulties which will result from a failure to grant the variance would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose. I think that while you could live in this home as is, it's an older home and will require renovation at some point. And I do believe that this would be unreasonable to considering all your neighbors have new buildings as well. Does anybody have any questions or concerns on criteria number 4? And then I'm going to number 5. Granting the variance is the minimum action that will make possible the use of land or structure in a manner which is not contrary to the public interest and which would carry out the spirit of the zoning ordinance, secure public safety, and provide substantial justice. I can certainly meet that. Yes, Member Hendrickson.
This is where I believe we've made strides since the last meeting, right? I didn't believe at the time during the last meeting that this criteria was being met because there were changes to the proposed plan that could have been done to make the variance more minimum action. And I'm pleased specifically with this criteria having been met better in this case. So I feel much more comfortable with this criteria, which allows me to get to the others as well.
I will also add that I think looking at the list of variances that Mr. Chapman was able to put together, that this absolutely approving this provides substantial justice for this particular home on this particular street with all of the neighbors having similar variances, and for the existing home to have similar variances as well. So I believe that is absolutely met. Criteria number 6, granting the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land or essential character in the vicinity of the property. I think that we can meet that criteria. Criteria number 7, the conditions pertaining to the land or structure are not so general or recurrent in nature as to make the formulation of a general regulation for such conditions practicable. This is actually the only one I have a hard time with for reasons that we talked about last time, which is that if every single property in this block or in this 3-block radius has variance on it, then I think it is something we need to look at. I do not think it's fair, however, to put that on this particular applicant. Yes, Member Hendrickson.
Yeah, to that point, the Planning Commission is currently working with our township staff to draft an ordinance amendment that we hope will address this issue going forward. I agree that, the conditions are general in this area and this needs to be addressed. But I do not believe that it is fair to this applicant to hold up this, which may take, several weeks or months to, get the ordinance amended. I think we should allow this to go through, and with the knowledge that we are correcting the problem long-term, and that hopefully this will not be an issue for future applicants.
Yes, Director Schmidt.
Thank you very much. Just briefly to add on to Chairperson Hendrickson's comments, we take the feedback of the ZBA and the Planning Commission to heart and recognize that there's some problems with the Lake Lansing Overlay District based on the number of cases that you guys have seen, at least even my short time here. So I think what we're going to do, the plan of attack here, just so everyone's aware, is we're probably going to propose 2 intermediate fixes to address the immediate concerns, and then start taking a more holistic look at the overall ordinance and seeing what needs to be done to make it work for everyone, not just people on Columbia, but people, on the other side of Mark's watershed, which are still technically in the district as well. So I think that's our approach, is going to be bring those sort of 2 quick fixes to the Planning Commission very early next year, and then start looking at a broader approach for the whole thing. So we would welcome
Great.
any input that any member has on that.
Great news. Thank you so much. And I do believe we discussed coming up with a couple of points that we could for the ZBA to forward both to staff and to Township Board and Planning, so that we could all get the ball rolling. And I appreciate that, because I think that is something that even in the short time you've been here, you've seen quite a few cases. And I looked at that list and thought, oh, I've sat on at least 2 or 3 of these, and that's just on Columbia Street. So I do appreciate that. I think that'll be really helpful for your neighbors as well. And finally, criteria number 8, granting the variance will be generally consistent with public interest and the purposes and intent of this chapter. And I can absolutely meet that criteria with this. With that, Member Hendrickson.
I move to approve the variances as requested in ZBA case 21-10-27-1, 2050 Sheldrake Avenue.
Support.
Okay. Any discussion on that motion between the 3 of us? Yes, Member Opsimer.
Yeah, I just wanted to summarize and kind of echo some of the things that have been said, but
Yes.
I appreciate Member Hendrickson's input at the previous meeting, which did lead to the minimal action that we're taking tonight. And I think when you look at the variances that have been approved that Mr. Chapman put together and that our planning staff have kept on record over the decades, the action that we're taking tonight is certainly within roughly the median of the actions that have been taken and the variances that have been granted over the course of the time. And I think the deliberative step that our staff are taking now with the Planning Commission and the board to rectify this portion of the overlay district is a good course of action, because you do see very wide discrepancies in terms of the variances approved, especially for the front yard setback. But I do think we are within the spirit of it, because I think the spirit of it, as I've understood it, was creating flexibility for these very difficult and oddly shaped parcels, maybe not always oddly shaped, but narrow at minimum. And I think maybe that front yard setback was the kind of the oversight in drafting that. But so I think we've taken a very holistic approach with this case and arrived at a good place. Thank you.
Excellent. All right, on that note, I will go to a vote. Member Opsimer.
Yes.
Member Hendrickson.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. So your variance has been approved. We appreciate you very much coming back and taking another look at that and being patient with us as we went through this criteria. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, in that note, it looks like we're moving on to new business. Let me get back to my agenda here. Okay, new business, it brings us to ZBA case number 21-12-08-1, SHG2755 LLC, and Green Peak Industries Incorporated, 5030 Northwind Drive, Suite 120, East Lansing, Michigan, 48823. And with that, Mr. Chapman.
So the applicant is requesting a variance to construct a 13,500 square foot commercial building located at 5030 Northwind Drive. The submitted site plan shows a single retail building that has 11,970 square feet in the main building, along with 1,530 square feet of loading area. The site is completely, or the properties are completely developed with existing commercial centers. These are proposed to be demolished for the new commercial building, along with an associated parking lot. The site plan for the removal of a building and construction of the current commercial building at 2755 Grand River Avenue was approved on October 9th, 2002, and our assessing records indicate the building to the south of that was constructed in 1966. So the lot lines will need to be adjusted, which the applicant is planning on doing in conjunction with the site plan approval. The property is approximately 2.2 acres in size, is Zone C2 commercial, and a shopping center is permitted by right, subject to site plan review. Section 86-755, the schedule of requirements for parking spaces, states that commercial centers that have a gross floor area of less than 25,000 square feet have a minimum of 5 and a maximum of 5.5 parking spaces per 1,000 square feet. The commercial building is required to have a minimum of 60 and a maximum of 66 parking spaces. This calculation is based on the square footage of the main building and does not include the loading area. So the site plan shows a total of 115 parking spaces. This requires a variance of 49 parking spaces for the extra spaces. Just one thing to note, that this variance differs from the applicant's requested variance of 44 parking spaces because staff removed the loading area from that parking calculation. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chapman. Would the applicant or the applicant's representative like to come up and speak on this case? And we just ask that you state your name and address for the public record.
Thank you. My name is Robert Ford. I'm at 809 Center Street, Lansing, Michigan. That's the place for our business, Landscape Architects and Planners. And I am a landscape architect and president of the company. Here representing SHG 2755. And I'll just mention that they are local passive investors in this project. So they are members of the community. I'll go through just to sort of reiterate some of the things that are on the application, and hopefully that'll give a little broader perspective. The theme, if there is a theme, is fresh produce, meats, and flowers. The boutique grocer. The reputation of this national specialty boutique grocer has a strong consumer base because people equate this brand to a high quality fresh goods, a beautiful display of their products, and a shopping experience that is unique. A local Facebook group with over 4,000 followers, locally based, has been asking the grocer since 2009 to come to the greater Lansing area. The boutique grocer has over 500 stores nationwide with 7 locations in Michigan. A local developer said on Facebook that he has reached out to this grocer over 25 times over the past 10 years. I think they are interested, he said, but I just don't know where they would like to go. Staff for the grocer considers potential customer demand, distance from potential locations to a distribution center, and properties that are the right size for a store, typically no more than 10 to 15,000 square feet. Obviously, there's other locations within the metro area that they could choose to locate, but they've chosen this site. Uniqueness. This neighborhood grocer will provide a wide variety of specialty items not found in traditional grocery stores. They go out of their way to promote unique products, interesting recipes, fresh produce, lean cuts of meat, and a variety of beautiful cut flowers. It translates into a clean, easy to find, well-lit, and friendly shopping experience for its customers. This grocer has evolved to the point that they have their own unique brands. They take pride in delivering on their promise of creating superior quality products at a relatively low price. Redevelopment opportunity. This is an excellent redevelopment opportunity for the entire Meridian community because this store will provide access to fresh produce, meats, and flowers, and a variety of specialty items and brands not offered in East Lansing or the Meridian Township area. It will create a great vibe, bring in fresh customer base that will in turn create more visibility and traffic for the remaining commercial entities in this dated shopping center. Visibility, access, and traffic. There are few sites, if any, available in Meridian Township positioned correctly for this type of a national boutique specialty grocer. They would probably have to locate outside the township if this site does not work out. This store requires good visibility from a main street, which makes it even more difficult to find a comparable site. The Grand River Avenue offers such exposure. It also has a traffic light at Northwind and Grand River, which offers controlled vehicular access, which is highly desired. The site will also have LED shielded lighting throughout the parking lot, and because the adjacent uses are primarily commercial and industrial, the impacts of the commercial lighting are negligible, safe, and make driving in the evening easy to negotiate. In addition, there's also a good sidewalk network that links to this site, and the store will provide adequate bicycle parking. Turnover rate. This specialty grocer economizes shelf space, making the building footprint about 1/3 the size of a traditional grocer's. And its inventory is turned over at a much faster rate. Therefore, restocking is required at a much higher volume. This increases the need for employees to unload stock, stack the shelves, creating more jobs than a normal grocer. Managers are trained to engage with their customers in a neighborhood-friendly manner to guarantee customer satisfaction. This type of service and quality products create a volume of traffic that sells almost 2 times the amount per square foot compared to other grocers. This unique style of merchandising creates more parking at peak hours than the parking ratio that currently guides Meridian Township. The uniqueness in consumers' allegiance to this brand creates a demand that requires more spaces than the township recommends in their ordinance at this time. It is not overparking, it is simply meeting the peak consumer demand that occurs daily for this grocer. Peak demand. Between the hours of 5:15 and 7 p.m., there's a much greater demand for parking spaces than the average grocery store based upon this grocer's track record. Just think of the number of people who work or attend MSU traveling home eastbound along Grand River each night that will stop here and shop. Therefore, to generate the same amount of revenue with only 66 spaces, the time for transactions would need to be reduced to 21.5 minutes instead of the national average for shopping transactions that are 41 minutes. The time a consumer spends shopping is probably not going to change very much, and therefore this ratio makes the project unfeasible with the parking being limited. The grocer needs 115 parking spaces to make this grocery store work, and that requires a variance that we are asking from the board tonight. Therefore, we respectfully ask for your consideration of our request.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ford. Is there anybody else that would like to speak on this case that's here tonight? I should have asked that. Okay, if not, if you'd like to stay close at the podium there so we can ask questions, we'll get it to our board time.
Sure.
All right. On that note, we will go to board time. Any questions or thoughts or comments yet? Yes, Member Opsmer, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman Sewer. So I was just wondering if you could share with the Zoning Board of Appeals who the applicant is, this boutique grocer.
The applicant is Trader Joe's.
Okay. We appreciate knowing that, and that's helpful to know. So, having worked on one previous application here in the township, which was Chick-fil-A on Grand River Avenue, I was on the planning commission when they came before us, and they told us about their model and their design for the drive-through and how many cars they needed to stack, and I think we minimized that, and now as a result, we often see the drive-through line backing up into the north, or actually the south of the property, into the service drive on the Meyer. But it was also due to some site limitations and being able to stack cars and do what they had hoped to achieve in terms of the number of cars to stack. That's something where I kind of learned a little bit on some of these more unique opportunities where people have a high demand to go visit some of these commercial spaces. So yours is certainly among them. This is obviously, an ordinance that we take very seriously because we do not like to permit, impervious coverage that is not, required. But I would put this in line with kind of the Chick-fil-A and the lesson that we learned on the drive-through and the need to stack the number of cars there. And sometimes there are certainly unique circumstances that conflict with our ordinances. So just some of my overarching thoughts on the applicant.
Great, thank you. Member Hendrickson.
Yeah, and to piggyback on Trustee Opsimer's point, the property here is already paved over. I mean, it's not like we're saving, the current pervious surface in this property. And, anyone, I do appreciate knowing the applicant as well, because anyone who's been to one of these establishments in other places around Michigan will well know that they are very, very popular, and parking, it comes at a premium, and I imagine that that the applicant knows better than anyone just how popular their store will be. To that point, the applicant stated, and is correct, that there are nearly 4,000 people in a couple of Facebook groups on, just a cursory search has shown that are begging to have this particular grocery store come into our area. It's safe to say, I think, that demand would be high, at least initially, and probably for quite some time. And, while I am probably the junior member on this board, I will say that I have never seen an applicant come in asking for more parking. I wasn't here when Chick-fil-A came in, but it's a rare case when more parking is requested. And in this case, I think it's completely well deserved, because I believe that this will likely do very well in Meridian Township. And I think that the applicant is preparing for their success, and I believe that, this is something that we should be doing as well.
Thank you, Member Hendrickson. I'm going to be the wet blanket a little bit, because I'm going to just come in and say, as the Zoning Board of Appeals, we do very much appreciate knowing who the applicant is. However, we also have to look at it holistically, knowing that this variance goes with this lot in perpetuity. So that said, Keith, could you pull up the site? Let's see, what is it labeled as? The site plan. I'm only a little bit of a wet blanket. I just want to take the name out of it, and let's look at this as a commercial parcel. Now, if I was doing some numbers and math, and let's say we get up to 42 if we take out parking on this side of the parcel and along the back. Okay, so we take that parking out to get down to 40, to get less 42 spaces. What happens to that space there? As Member Hendrickson pointed out, it's already paved, so it's already impervious. So they don't stripe it, but it still exists as pavement even once those buildings are down. So I think I came at this kind of in a backwards way, thinking about the fact that I think it's a matter of public safety to have enough space, but also that is going to be impervious space whether it's striped or not. So I see that as being a unique condition that whether we approve this variance or not, we still have this location being either unusable. I think what I wrote is as non-designated parking space, creating potential accidents, creating potential issues with, as the applicant said, with traffic, with people coming in and out during those busy rush hours. That could get a little ugly. So taking out the brand name here, look at that and saying that if we don't approve this variance, that just becomes pretty much wasted space. It can't be developed for anything else. There's not any other usage for that. We have the stormwater detention at the end of that lot there. We have the landscape buffer on the, the west side of the lot there. So I don't see what else can be done with that. I'm curious if anybody else has ideas, but at this point, I think that just based on that alone, regardless of, or in addition to the traffic flow, I see this as being a minimum action. So, yes, Member Hendrickson.
Yeah, and I agree that, we should come at this without, with blinders on in terms of the actual applicant. But the truth of the matter is that if it were not to be this, right, if this were to be someone else, 99% of applicants for, that would come into this space are going to be requesting less parking, not more. And so this, I feel, to be a little less of a concern for me than it otherwise would be. And one other thing I'll mention, just because it's something I have been working on now for a while, is that I do appreciate how the site is laid out. Not that this is germane to this particular variance request, but we are working in this area to move things closer to the road, put parking behind as we're trying to move ourselves as a township, at least in this area as a pilot, closer to a form-based code. And I'm very appreciative of the decision-making process to put the building up front, nearby to the road, parking behind, with no additional curb cuts onto Grand River, curb cuts coming off of Northwind. And I'm very pleased with how the site is laid out. I think it's going to be in keeping with the vision that we're hopefully going to be implementing in this area in short order. So just something I wanted to add on. It's not germane, like I said, to this variance request, but I do believe that it's of interest and value to the township to be having applicants that are moving us in that direction, even if we're not quite there yet ourselves.
Yeah, excellent point. Thank you, Member Hendrickson. And I will just say that I do feel like the way that this site is laid out in pushing those two parcels together, again, being, kind of having a future site here is an excellent site development for this area versus what is there now, and kind of pulling this corridor together and having some, yes, I would agree with what you had to say about not only form-based code, but just getting the curb cut off Grand River, utilizing that light that's on Northwind. The curb cuts will make for an excellent traffic flow here. I think this redesign of this particular parcel would be a great addition to the township. So, yeah, Member Opsmer.
Thank you, Chair Mansour. So just one question I had, because public safety comes to mind for me in granting the variance, but especially early on when you have high demand for parking at this location, have you considered or have you discussed meeting with Hobby Lobby and discussing shared parking arrangements with them?
We have considered that. I understand that there's another proposal going on right now for a bank that's located at that location. And I think that they were hesitant until they saw exactly how that was going to play out. But I don't know if that is really available or not. And I question, that's a pretty big store. When you look at their parking ratio, they probably need all of those spaces. But we certainly could entertain that and talk to them and see if there's any type of a joint use parking agreement that could be worked out. But I really do not know if that's an option or not. I would like to, if I can, just say that the impervious surface compared, if you compare this plan to the previous or existing situation, we are increasing the impervious amount of space by 14% compared to what's there today. And when you do talk about what's going to happen down the road, well, this site plan is down the road compared to what was done in the 50s and their 60s and thereabouts. So this is actually reinventing the site again. It would be hard to foresee exactly what would happen in the future, but the opportunity, if it's happening now, the opportunity in the future would exist as well. There's a high demand in this area. This particular spot was coveted and selected by them, and it's really exciting that there's a spot that's even available for this to fit in this location. And it's right on the main street, as you point out. You go right down Grand River Avenue, and as Mr. Osmer pointed out, we moved the site forward, and it's a 100-foot setback. So we gave up quite a bit of space there, or the client did. But at the same time, it's worth it because it presents itself well. It shows that your community is alive. Right now, sometimes when you drive down there and all you see is cars parked out by the main street and the store, well, where is the store? Oh, well, it's back there. And you sometimes miss it. Sometimes I go by, I don't even see the name of it. Doesn't really make an impression, a strong impression that there's, merchandise available and what is it. So anyway, that was some of our attempts. We also took a lot of work to make sure that we met all of the requirements. We met them all. There was 4 or 5 that we had to work on to get it down to just the one remaining. And if it wasn't so important to this client, we would have tried to do something different. But the parking is vital for this type of operation to succeed.
Mr. Ford, I wonder if I could ask, what if this variance isn't approved? Can you give me an idea of your client and what they would, if they're not able to reach this parking, what would that do for this development?
I can't speak directly on behalf of the client, but what I can do is based on the settlements that I've heard as we work through the design process, is that they would probably look for a different location.
Okay, that's helpful. So, all right. Well, I think I'm ready to go through criteria. Unless either of you have any more questions, I think I'm good. All right. Criteria number 1, unique circumstances exist that are peculiar to the land or structure that are not applicable to other land or structures in the same zoning district. I can meet that here. I think in joining these parcels together and creating this large of a site, I believe that in this commercial district becomes its own unique circumstance, particularly with the location, as Member Opsmer pointed out, traffic safety, parking concerns, those things I do find to be unique circumstances for this particular location. Number 2, these special circumstances are not self-created. One might argue that by pushing these 2 parcels together that this could be self-created. However, I do think that in order to redevelop these 2 parcels into one larger parcel, that it's in order to redevelop this would be not self-created. Yes. Member
And to the
Hendrickson.
previous conversation, the parcel's already being covered over and being,
Right.
already paved. is not a self-created problem either.
That's true.
That's existing to the land right now. That's not something that they are planning on doing.
Very true. Thank you. And criteria number 3, strict interpretation and enforcement of the literal terms and provisions of this chapter would result in practical difficulties. I think the applicant has done an excellent job explaining exactly why this variance is necessary, not only for a public safety standpoint, for a site plan. I believe that it could create practical difficulties and could ultimately tank this development without the variance. Yes, Member Opsmer.
Yeah, and I think you would run into practical difficulties because you would inevitably have people using the Hobby Lobby parking lot, and as we've heard, and as we know, private entities are pretty territorial with their parking. So I still would encourage the applicant to pursue that, but they're probably going to get a no, and so we need to be able to park the site to where their customers are lawfully able to park.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of that, I think that even with some kind of verbal agreement from Hobby Lobby, as the applicant pointed out, they have a very large store. So those spaces are, necessary. I also find it to be a little bit of a safety concern thinking about the crossing across Northwind there and thinking about people crossing over, not at the crosswalk, in the dark. That's another additional reason to me to support these additional spaces. So I believe I can meet practical difficulties. The alleged practical difficulties, which will result from a failure to grant the variance, would unreasonably prevent the owner from using the property for a permitted purpose. I think as a commercial building, you need to have the parking, and as Member Hendrickson has pointed out, usually we get, can I have a few less spaces? But having adequate parking, I don't think here is a negative, and I do think that for a permitted purpose for this particular location, I can meet that requirement. Criteria number 5, granting the variance is a minimum action that will make possible the use of land or structure in a manner which is not contrary to the public interest and which would carry out the spirit of the zoning ordinance, secure public safety, and provide substantial justice. And I did hear that you've gotten it back down to just this one variance. So that in and of itself shows me that they worked to meet this minimum action. Yes, Member Hendrickson.
And to the chair's point about public safety, I do think that, it's worth pointing out that having sufficient parking on site and sufficient flow of traffic on site is critical to ensuring public safety while going about and allowing this business to operate. So I think that to that extent, the public safety concerns are being met by granting this variance as a minimum action. And just so the applicant is aware, because we took this up 2 weeks ago, the application for the credit union that's coming in across the street was approved through the Planning Commission, and I believe it's coming through the board maybe this week or next week.
On Tuesday.
Yeah, so that process of the bank across the street is going through and will be completed as of next week, most likely. So if you were looking for an opportunity to reach back out to Hobby Lobby to discuss parking, that matter should be settled in a matter of days.
Yes, Member Opsmer.
The only thing I would add in terms of public interest, we are seeing a reduction in the impervious surface area, so that is in the public interest, and these sites have sat in their current state for decades, and so it's uncommon to have opportunities to actually reduce that impact, and we need private investment to come in to achieve that. So
I would agree with both of you. Thank you for those lovely points. Criteria number 6, granting the variance will not adversely affect adjacent land or the essential character of the vicinity of the property. I think Member Opsmer just stated that eloquently. I think this is only going to improve that corridor. And I think that, as also the applicant pointed out, having that business right there on Grand River is only going to help that improve the area in that corridor. Criteria number 7, the conditions pertaining to the land or structure are not so general or recurrent in nature as to make the formulation of a general regulation for such conditions practicable. And I believe that this is we can meet that criteria. Criteria number 8, granting the variance will be generally consistent with public interest and the purposes and intent of this chapter. and I can wholly meet that criteria. So on that note,
Do I have an opportunity to say anything in addition?
sure,
Okay.
Mr. Ford, go ahead.
It sounds like there's a couple of concerns that you have. One is the additional, or the additional parking if we needed to cross the street. And the other is the traffic flow, if I could say that term, because
Yes.
generally the speeds in Northwind are fairly slow. I mean, it's got a curve to it. It can only go so far so fast. And at the same time, we do have two exits from the parking lot, inbound and outbound. The stacking is something that I think you are alluding to at the light. So there might be, if you need additional information, if you want us to look at that a little bit more in depth, we'd be happy to do that and take the time needed to quell any concerns that you might have.
Thank you so much. Is that, yes, Member Hendrickson?
So just to move us forward a little bit here in our discussion, I'll go ahead and move the approval of the variance request in ZBA case number 21-12-08-1 for 5030 North Wind Drive, Suite 120 in East Lansing.
Support. All right. Yes, I will just say, I appreciate that yourself and your applicant, or I'm sorry, your client, are willing to put forward that traffic information. I think that would be helpful just for general. I don't think that impacts our decision tonight, because I think that the parking alone, being right there at that light, and also knowing and kind of looking ahead, maybe that's something that you can work with your client, just to be aware of and kind of making strides with. I don't even think I feel we need to require that. That they have those discussions. I don't know that Hobby Lobby is going to be particularly receptive, so I don't find that to be a condition that I need to approve this. Anybody else feel differently? Member Hendrickson?
Yeah, if this were a special use permit and you were coming before the Planning Commission or the board to discuss that, that would be something that we would require, right, a traffic study. But in this case, it's not a requirement, although, as Chairman sort of points out, certainly we would be happy to have the information about how much traffic is going to be generated, if only because, there may be required or requested timing updates at the light at Northwind as your construction and, finishes and customers start arriving.
We did have Progressive Engineering take a look at the traffic comparisons, and the trips generated from the businesses that are currently there and the amount of traffic that they created, even with the additional parking that we're proposing, it had less of an impact than what is existing.
Yeah.
So I don't think that there's going to be as much of a concern as you might think based upon what we're hearing from our traffic engineer, if that helps.
Yeah, that absolutely helps. I mean, I think for me, knowing that there's this many spaces, I mean, I've been to a few Trader Joe's stores in my time, and there's never 115 parking spaces in any Trader Joe's parking that I've been to. So I do find that this is at least attempting to address that concern. And I think that as we mentioned in our criteria, I think this is a minimum action, is at least getting to this amount of space that will create enough room and ability to accommodate the demand. It seems to be sufficient to me, so.
So if we need to table this for us to come back to you, we will. I just want you to know that.
We do appreciate that. I think that at this point, sir, I think that you've got 3 yeses here. So,
Thank you very much.
I truly appreciate it. And I think that that's important to note, that it is wonderful to have a developer, a landscaper, an architect that is willing to say, let's make this work. How do we make this work? We haven't always had that. So that's refreshing and very helpful. And I really appreciate that. But I don't think that that's going to be required for us to.
And before I leave, I just want
Sure.
to thank Keith and Tim.
Yeah.
They've been very gracious and very helpful and allowing us to negotiate through the rules and regulations. And we really do appreciate that as well.
All right. Well, we know we have excellent staff here in Meridian Township, but we also have staff and economic developer over there in the corner that want Meridian to be a great place for business and a great place for people to live. And that's our focus here. So that's what the goal that we're all trying to achieve here for Meridian Township. So
Thank you very
we
much.
appreciate that we can all work together on that.
Really appreciate
So,
it.
absolutely. All right, on that note, anybody else have any discussion before we take a vote? All right, well, I will start all the way at the end there. Member Opsmer.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry, this is a motion to approve the variance request. Member Hendrickson.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes, so your variance has been approved, Mr. Ford. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, on that note, now that I need to get back in my computer here. All right, let's see. I think the last bit here is our other business, which is our 2022 meeting schedule.
Yeah, so just real quick, we
Yes.
talked last meeting about this, and
Yes.
I think we came to the consensus that the third Wednesday would be the best. So this schedule takes all of that into account.
Okay. Has everyone, all three of us, have had a chance to look at those meetings? Does that work with existing meetings that everybody had? Okay, great. All right, in that case, I will motion to approve the 2022 meeting schedule as noted in the packet.
Support?
Okay, and we'll go through a roll call vote. Chair Mansour is a yes. Member Hendrickson?
Yes.
And Member Opsmer?
Yes.
Okay, the 2022 meeting schedule has been approved. Do I have to officially sign that?
Yeah, so I'll
Okay.
email you a copy.
Okay, sounds good. All right, on that note, I think we are at public comment. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak on tonight's cases or any zoning board of appeal business at all? No? All right, in that case, I will close public remarks. Board member comments. Does anybody have anything they would like to say? Member Hendrickson?
So it falls upon me this week to encourage the members of our viewing public that should you want to be a part of the fun that we have at the Zoning Board of Appeals, you can come on in and submit an application to the township. You can find it at the township website, meridian.mi.us. We have a lot of fun here. You can be a part of making the township a better place, like bringing in new businesses to the township and approving decks and homes and all sorts of fun things that people request.
Yes.
So come on in. It's now only one meeting per month, and it's the third Wednesday, as you just heard. We are short one member, two and two alternates. One member and two alternates. So come on in. You'll get a backstage pass to government.
Thank you very much, Member Hendrickson. That was an excellent sales pitch. And any other board member comments? I would just say I'm going to be the one that will be hopefully just contacting by email and seeing if I can get some suggestions from all of you as far as putting together an official letter of suggestions as far as regarding Lake Lansing overlay to staff, to Township Board, and to planning. So look for that email coming soon so that we can get that out and start working on that towards the beginning of the year and let these guys get some ideas of where they should be headed. So look for that from me, but otherwise, other than that, have a great holiday season and we'll see you next year.
You too.
All right, on that note, this meeting is officially adjourned. Thank you very much.